Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rebecca Dirks Garcia, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. Tiari is encountering a few technical issues, but as soon as she gets those resolved, she'll be on board with us. There she is. So just in time to have you. That's the joy of virtual, right? Sometimes everything works and sometimes not so much. So we appreciate it. So again, let me just get our slide sharing and then we'll get going. You're welcome to put yourself off camera if you'd like, but we will ask for your engagement in the chat and such. But love to get your feedback, but also know that as people are doing other stuff on a Saturday afternoon, you're welcome to be in the background if you need to be. So just briefly, the agenda for today, we're going to do a quick introduction. We're going to be talking about PTA and family engagement, what is transformative family engagement, and then what we refer to as the 4 I's. So first, just starting with introductions, my name is Rebecca Dirks Garcia. I am the immediate past president as of literally like last week of Nevada PTA. And I am also a mom of 4, ages 27 to 11. And I have 3 currently in K-12. They're all in middle and high school now. And also in my professional life, I am a director of community impact for a workforce development nonprofit in Southern Nevada. And then we have Tiari joining with us. And if her backup tech is working, we'll see whether or not she'll be able to introduce herself real quick.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, you're good.
Woo, okay. So my name is Tiari Norwood. I don't have a chair, so I'm hunching over. Yes, so I am the VP of programs with Nevada PTA, which means I get to handle all of the fun stuff, the events, the programs that help support those events, and all of the initiatives that PTA stands for in its mission. I have a 1-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 14-year-old daughter. So space them out a little there. But yeah, I'm here to just talk to you guys about transformative things.
So we would ask that each of you share your name and your role, whether you're an educator, family, community member, student, or if you're more than one of those, because the reality is there's very few of us that just wear one hat. So go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. I know many of you already put your name and where you're from, but if you haven't already, just let us know if you're an educator or a family member or what role you have in the process. We wanted to start by introducing, I know PTA is one of those things that a lot of people say, oops, sorry, if I get my slides working right, that helps. One of those things that a lot of people are aware of the name, but aren't always understanding of the full background and history with PTA. So this year we are excited to be celebrating the 125th anniversary of PTA nationwide. We are the oldest and largest children's advocacy organization in America, voluntary children's advocacy organization in America. Here in Nevada, we are celebrating 81 years across the state. And our mission is to make every child's potential a reality by engaging and empowering families and communities to advocate for all children. That is the heart of what PTA is about. And that's why when we talk about family engagement, transformative family engagement, and the other things that we're going to be talking about today, it all comes back to our history of working for over 125 years with families, the community, and educators to try to help ensure that children can reach their full potential. And so many of you, especially if you're an educator, might be familiar with the National PTA Standards for Family School Partnership. The old graphic on the left, the gold and navy, is one that we've had for quite some time. These standards were created more than 2 decades ago and are the foundation for many districts and state family engagement policies. That's true here in Nevada and across the country. The updates happening now is that PTA just launched actually this week. The graphic on the right is that we have just completed a multi-year process to update the national standards for family school partnership. You'll see that the standards have actually remained the same because there was a shared decision that we didn't need completely to try to learn all new things and start from scratch, but instead it's really the meat underneath those standards that have been updated to be relevant to today's families and educational systems. And we invite you all on November 17th, National PTA. This was a question I got in an earlier session, so just sharing now, National PTA is holding a town hall with education leaders at the federal level, as well as across the nation, to share more about how the standards have been updated. And these were updated with expert guidance and family engagement and educator feedback, but also the Dr. Karen Mapp and others assisted in the process of getting these updated. So when we say the word transformative, because that's today's topic, what is transformative engagement, family engagement? What do you guys think? Put in the chat. Or if you want to raise your hand and speak, we like engagement. What does transformative mean to you? Change towards the positive, what works for your community. I like that. Change, all those things, right? The concept of transformative family engagement grew out of National PTA's initiative, which is the Center for Family Engagement. And so several years ago, it was this discussion point of, we keep saying family engagement, right? We need to engage families. We know it's important. We know it moves the needle for kids. We know it helps increase outcomes and success. But really, what is it? And how do we do it well? And that's where the concept that we've embraced about transformative family engagement comes from, is that it can't just be about how do we say we've engaged families, but what is that engagement doing and how is it making an impact? And so today we're going to talk about the 4 I's of transformative family engagement to help give you some ideas of how you can ensure that family engagement is making an impact and changing for the better things in your community. And these are the 4 principles of transformative family engagement that we'll be talking about today. 1 is inclusive, 2 is individualized, 3 is integrated, and 4 is impactful. And the first one that we're going to start with is inclusive, and Tiari is going to share some information about that with everybody.
So inclusivity and inclusive, I think everyone's heard this word a lot over the past, I hope decades, but I know over the past few years, a lot more so. But it's just, to help everyone understand that all perspectives matter, no matter what your experiences, your lived experiences, it matters when it comes to integrating family engagement, intentionally building trusting relationships so that all feel welcome and comfortable. That is key. It's not just having people there because they fit a certain mold that you want to have there. Like, a lot of people think of diversity and inclusion as just having certain people at the table. We want those people at the table to also then have voices, to be heard, to be understood from their perspective and their realities. So that is inclusive practices. What would be an inclusive practice, or how do you think we could incorporate inclusivity into our best practices as educators, as parents of children going to school, as community members? Go ahead and type that in the chat. And while we're doing that, how can you question assumptions? Many people have assumptions. Another word for that might be more typical, I think, is stereotypes, right? How can you question that in a way that's meaningful and impactful? How do you feel when you're included? How do you feel when you're not included? I love the comments in the chat, providing language access for all families. So a simple example of something that I personally have struggled with over the years. I come from Hawaii. Spanish is not a language that is dominant there. We speak, English and broken English, which we call pidgin. So when I moved to the continental US, as it's called, I was it was a huge shock to see that Spanish is such a huge language here. And so what I've recently started doing is something so simple as making every flyer that we use for PTA or for a school function or message we want to send home, making sure it's in Spanish, so that the 60 to 70% of children in our school whose parents do speak Spanish feel that they are included, feel that they belong, and feel that they can be heard. So that's just a small example of something that can be done at any level, really, to promote inclusivity.
Well,
if you want to go ahead and type in the chat some ideas that you've put forward in your classroom or your schools, that'd be awesome.
One of the things that somebody commented on was Hallie. She talked about that language aspect, but it's not just Spanish and English. And sometimes we do make those assumptions. I know Tiari is partially fluent in Japanese because of that island background where that's so much more, and your own heritage. But people assume that that everybody, those are the only two languages that might be spoken in Southern Nevada, especially.
Right.
But there's so much more diversity.
Right. And so
go ahead.
I was really excited when I went to the CCST website and saw Tagalog was on there. And it's not something that I speak fluent, but I am Filipino and my grandpa spoke it to me as a kid. I don't remember a lot of it, but I was like, oh my gosh, they have representation. We have representation in Nevada. So I just thought that was pretty cool. And you're right, it's not just one language. It's even when we break down one language, right? There's so many different dialects. So really, how do we get there?
Yeah, and one of the comments that was put in that I think is important about questioning assumptions is we have to be willing to ask, right? You have to, and because there is a lot of assumptions. Both Tiari and I come from families where we have various ethnicities and races represented in our family unit. And so sometimes that's confusing for people and they don't want to ask, but that actually makes it harder to address the questions that exist. And so being respectful in that intentional relationship building mixed with questioning assumptions can make that path forward a lot easier. And and then just some of the strategies, I'll hand it back to you for those.
Okay. So embracing and valuing diverse perspectives, right? So learn names, family relationships, pronunciation, so simple, right? When you meet someone and their name is Tiari Violani Tenorio, you're like, oh my gosh, that is a name, right? That is a long name and I can't even remember what she first said. But take the time to ask someone to say, I'm sorry, can you repeat that again for me? So my name, my birth name is Tiari Violani. I am now Tiari Norwood, but I've become accustomed to just answering to whatever name people say. And I don't think that, when you sit down and think about that, it's not really okay. It's so easy for someone to learn a name. It's so much harder for you to have to deal with that throughout your whole life. It's just being called someone else, So work on that with your students, your families, your friends. Learn names. It's so simple and you'll learn so much about a language by hearing a name. So create a more welcoming environment to newcomers by avoiding acronyms or making inside jokes. Yeah, I think that one speaks for itself. I start to question assumptions by thinking about the calendar, including holidays and traditions. And that's something that has been happening a lot more lately. And I don't mean to take bring any politics into anything, but there are states that recognize Columbus Day as now Indigenous Peoples Day, right? So that's something that society has really taken on its own and advocated for and made happen in certain states. Create casual opportunities to build positive relationships. You know, when you see someone in the hall and you don't know their name, talk to them, or you meet someone new, ask them where they're from. It's very simple.
And I think oftentimes we think that inclusion has to be a program or a policy, when really everyone just wants to be seen and heard for who we are as individuals and recognize that we have value and worth. And that the amount of diversity that exists across the spectrum beyond what we can see or what we're aware of visually is always also so much greater than we give credit for. And that is something that is also often a real challenge in education spaces for families that have children who receive special education services or who are differently abled. Sometimes we forget that diversity exists in so many different ways, and how we embrace it as a positive attribute versus something that we have to address makes a huge difference in how people feel.
Right.
And at the end of the day, that's what changes family engagement, is when everyone feels like they have a place in the process. So the next one is that individualized, meeting the unique needs of every family and child. Families want information, tools, and connections that are relevant to them and their child. And I know that this can be a really hard thing when an educator has 35 kids in a classroom or 200 kids in a secondary school. The idea of like, how do we make this relevant to families for them and their child? But at the same time, when you take the time for the opportunity to engage and recognize that needs aren't the same across the board, it allows for opportunities to provide individual experiences. Individualized family engagement includes being responsive. So when a family or a community member or an educator sees and shares, how do we acknowledge that? How do we respond to it so that we say, you're right, that doesn't work for you, but maybe this will. Personal invitations. So often we hear from people in the education space who say, how do we get people to attend? People come when there's a performance or they come when there's food, but like we want them to come for something that's about education. And one of the biggest ways when you talk to people about whether or not they're going to attend something or engage with something is whether or not they were asked. Not just a flyer that got hung up that maybe they were like, well, I didn't know that if that was for me, but instead a personal connection. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to call 200 people, but how are you making it clear that individually, as a family or as a group, that people are wanted and that their perspective is being considered in the process? And then also tailored experiences, recognizing that if you're looking at, for example, a calendar of events over the course of the year, if you target all of them broadly, you may get a lot of people, but are you always achieving your goal of whatever the outcome is that you're looking for? Probably not, unless it is just to get people there. Oftentimes, creating smaller opportunities that are more specific can help increase engagement, because then there's more buy-in to the process. How have you seen engagement be personalized or individualized that has worked? Does anybody have any ideas they would be willing to share in the chat? How has it worked to make things more individualized, something that's been successful? Any ideas? So I know one thing that I've seen be successful in the past is when there have been that outreach to families to say, what is it that you need help with? Or what is it that you want to connect with? And then providing different ways to meet that. So maybe there's an option in the evening. Maybe there's an option that's virtual. Maybe there's something that is on a weekend, so that there's different ways that people can engage with it that meet their needs and their schedule. Some of the strategies that can help with individualized family engagement include that idea of tailoring. I always love, I say this all the time because of where I work, but one size fits all rarely does. Think of the last time you held up a one size fits all shirt or dress or anything like that. Did it really fit anybody? So often when we're trying to appeal to everyone, it ends up missing the mark for more and more people. So how can you tailor experiences? Often it's by doing it by subject area, by grade level, by language, by the setting, or like I said earlier, by the time that it's being offered. And by setting, I mean, for some families, it might be easier to join virtually. Other families, technology makes it harder to access because they may not have that ability on their own. Also, make it personal. Be more than a name on a screen. I know that I'm more likely to respond to an educator who I know. How often do you want, for educators, I'm sure you think about it, when you can't place a student and a family and figure out who it is you're picking up a phone to call or who it is that you're sending an email to, other than the fact that that's the name attached to that child in Infinite Campus, it makes getting started uncomfortable. And that was one of the comments that somebody put in the chat, is that a lot of these practices, it takes effort that can sometimes be uncomfortable to get the process started. But I think if we think about what all of our intentions are, coming from a place of wanting to do what's best for kids and wanting to help kids reach their full potential, it provides the opportunity for each of us to take that time of discomfort and make it more impactful as the time goes on. And then one of the other things, and I know Thierry made a comment about surveys too, is listen. So often we assume, we talked about assumptions before, but it works for this one too. We assume that people want X, Y, or Z. And we may make that assumption because, well, we had huge attendance when we did this activity last year. So that must mean that everybody loved it and we need to do it again. But the question becomes, what goals are those activities or events or programs helping to achieve? One of the things that people laugh at me, I can sometimes be a very direct person, and I have a saying that family engagement is more than butts and seats. There's a lot of activities where people check a box that family engagement has happened because there have been X number of people at an event or an activity. But if at the end of the day, it's not changing outcomes for kids, then we need to rethink what we want to do so that it is more impactful. Holly, I really appreciate the comment that you just said. Would you mind unmuting and maybe sharing a little bit more about that? Because I think that's a really vital thing to talk about.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, you're perfect.
Okay. Yeah, so a lot of the families that I work with our refugee families, and a lot of them, if they take time off to go to a conference during the day, they have to miss an entire day of work. And financially, that's just not something that they can do. So they just miss out. And a lot of times they don't even understand, what is a parent-teacher conference even mean? And why is it important that they go? So reaching out to those families individually and finding out when is a good time for them to attend. And, it might not be that same conference week. The teacher may have to make an adjustment, and helping them understand why it's important and to get them into the school.
Yep. Well, but also recognizing that sometimes I think we get very caught up on the framework of what we want an activity to be. And yes, is it ideal for a parent to come into the school for a conference? Yes, but if it's always going to be an impediment with work, and especially for families who can't miss work, and there's a lot of people who work in inflexible work environments. I work in workforce development in a nonprofit, so it's a constant struggle for the women that I serve in my professional capacity. Then the question is a telephone going to be more productive than not doing it all, right? How do you think, Holly, you've found success in trying to bridge that gap?
I think some of it, like you said, either, trying to do it virtual, I'll go to the house and help them with the computer or giving them over the phone interpretation so that the teacher of the school could call and talk to them at home. Some of the schools that work with populations that have more inflexible schedules will schedule some of their conferences in the evenings so that they are able to connect with those families, and whether it's over the phone or whether it's the families coming in the evenings, but it's really that personal connection.
Mm-hmm. And somebody else commented about having that virtual option can make a big difference. But like you said, it's the personal. And one of the other things I want to point out, and this leads directly into what Tiari is going to talk about next in the third eye, but want to just kind of draw the connection to it for everybody, is think about your own life. If you don't understand why you're supposed to do something, how likely are you to do it, especially as an adult? If there's no why attached to it for you, it's going to fall to the side, especially in a busy life, and if it's hard for you to do logistically. So we can't assume that everybody understands why things are important in the education space. We have a population in Nevada that is incredibly diverse, coming from many different countries, many different educational backgrounds. And so just because we're used to things the way they are, because we had parent-teacher conferences growing up when we were kids, doesn't necessarily mean that that's the lived experience of someone else. That may not be the way it was done where they grew up. Or they may not have had a family dynamic where they knew that was happening, because it wasn't. So we need to recognize that understanding the why of education-related activities makes a difference to the level of commitment that most parents will put forward to engage with it. So sometimes we just say, push something out and assume people will come or engage with it. But if they don't understand it, it's really hard to make that possible. And that's why the next I, which is integrated, is so important.
So I would like for everyone, I want everyone to participate, to type in the chat why you are here, like actually why you're here and your affiliation. Are you a teacher, an educator, a staff member at a school? Are you a community member, a community partner, a parent? And Rebecca, if you could look through that for me since I'm on my phone.
Yep, I gotcha.
What is your why, right? We might all have a deep thought out why, but I want you to really analyze what that extra push was that made you come here.
And there's no judgment. If you're here for the credit,
right.
That's your why.
My point,
that's your why.
That can absolutely be your why. You're getting what you need to further yourself in your educational, on your educational path, and doing what is required of you. But what is the incentive for someone who is a parent to come to this meeting? What credit does that parent get? Right? I'm a teacher and I love my families. That's amazing. Teacher, librarian, family engagement liaison, teacher and parent, right? So we all have a connection to education here, right? I've worked in a school. I'm on the board for Nevada PTA. I have a child. I have 3 children, 2 of which are in CCSD schools. But everyone here, I believe, if I'm reading through the comments correctly, has a tie to education outside of just being a parent, not just being an amazing parent. Now, why couldn't we get parents here, right? To this family engagement summit? Why? That's huge. That's a huge thing to look at. I don't think we have a parent here that's just a parent. So anyway, my point in that is to just kind of to show that you're here and you have your whys. I'm sure there are multiple reasons. We need to figure out what the why is for the parent, right? And educate them on that. So our next slide, are you there? Yes. So link learning to engagement and connect families to what is happening in your classroom or in the classroom. So that can be a barrage of things, right? It can mean maybe you do have to, you work your whole school day, you've had a rough day, there's this annoying PTA event, right? It's a science night, but you've got to go home and cook dinner and do this with your family and run some errands because you need this for a project for your class next or tomorrow. Maybe stop in at that event, say hi to 1 or 2 families, make that personal connection. They might ask you a question about what's happening in the classroom. You might build a relationship that will give that parent the why, you know? I do this with our librarian at the school. She always is in a rush to leave because she's got so much to do. You know, she sees every kid in the school. She wants to make sure everything's perfect. So she does a lot of her work at home, but she can barely stay at our events. So what I'll do is I'll shove her into the room and I'll say, just go say hi to 1 kid, make that 1 kid's night to see Miss Valencia here. You know, they'll be so happy. And they always are. She gets her picture, she talks to the parent and she leaves. But it's that one-on-one connection. She's integrating the fun with what's happening in library, you know? And I think that's something that's so important. So if we can get more staff members to support those after school events. I know some are mandated and you have to be there when the principal says this is the 1 or 2 events a year you must do, right? And you guys do a lot as educators. You're already there all day and then you have to stay even later and then you end up helping clean or whatever. But it's just so important to the student and their family to see you outside of that classroom environment. There we go. So going beyond one-time events, you know, that says everything on its own. Putting the T in PTA. Do we all know what the T in PTA stands for? Type it in the chat. First one to answer gets a high five, a virtual one.
Virtual.
I don't see it up yet. Yay!
We got it, teacher.
Clarissa, teacher. So
yeah, I like Kay, but
go.
I'm not sure your whole name. She says just learn to scoot out before the cleanup. Smart woman.
Learn
yeah.
to scoot out. Yep. You pop in, get a photo.
And I think
Rebecca.
So one of the things that I was going to respond to, there was a question about how to get parents here. Yes, actually, this was shared pretty heavily with different parent groups that we're part of. But for so many families, it does go back to that why. It goes back to if I'm juxtaposing this against work versus, I know even for me, it just happened to work out well, but like my daughter's at an all-day choir thing and I had to get her there right before the keynote. And I'm missing the final to go see her at a performance. But if it hadn't worked out, I probably would have chosen, as a normal parent, as a day-to-day parent, probably chosen her activities on a Saturday or grocery shopping or all the other things that have to be done if I didn't know what I was going to walk away with. And that, I think, is one of those, like, we think of events as a way to reach families, and they can be a positive way, but so much of the linking to learning is often most impactful when it does happen in those smaller ongoing activities. Like I think I had a parent, or I had a teacher of one of my kids, we used to get invited in, which doesn't work for all families because it was during the school day, but at least it was in the community we were in. There was quite a few where one parent was caregiving or a grandparent. And one of the big things what she did is she had all the kids teach us math strategies in 4th grade. And we rotated through centers and learned about the different math strategies. And as somebody who didn't really understand math the first time, let alone quote unquote new math that parents are always complaining about online, it was a phenomenal opportunity for me. I did have to say that I felt a little uncomfortable many times when the little 10-year-olds knew more than me and in how to explain the different strategies and stuff. But it's been 5 years since that happened. I still remember being so much more connected to what my child was learning. And I had 2 more kids that came after that I got to use those skills for. Although I use a train the trainer model and tried to encourage my older ones to teach the younger ones. But it was those opportunities to actually see, rather than just saying, I don't understand why you have to learn math this way, which is what a lot of us feel. I saw why. I got the why of how it made sense and how it was being taught. And that is something I would never get without having the opportunity to experience it. Sorry, I'll hand it back to you, Tiari.
If y'all can think back to when Common Core was, everyone was in kind of a huff about it. My daughter's elementary school hosted parent or family university mornings where they would show the parents how to do Common Core so that when the kids came home and needed help, the parent could help, right? They'd show them the resources. Well, here's the website. If you look on the worksheet, it shows you what program we're using and what the website is that you can get resources from. And I had a parent sit there and it was a little sad. There was a bee flying by my face. I'm so sorry. But she said, I don't know how to do it. I didn't learn it that way. How am I supposed to do this? And as she was saying that, she had her phone in her hand and she was like texting someone. So another parent stood up and said, use your phone. And just said, take the phone that you're using. He was very upset by it because he felt like we're parents, we're supposed to be the other half of the education, right? If not more, because we're with our children more. He was like, how dare you say that you don't know how to do something? You're literally texting someone right now. You've learned how to use a phone. You didn't have that before. When you were learning math the other way, you didn't have a phone, and you've learned how to use a phone and you're using it to communicate. So Google it, find YouTube, do whatever you need to do. And that was kind of an in-your-face response, but that is the reality of it. So if we can find a way to make that fun for parents, like Rebecca said, with having the parents rotate through the stations and do math, and having the 10-year-olds making you feel a little inferior, but it makes them feel great to be able to show you something and not be told, oh, that's not how I did it, that's wrong. Your teacher's teaching you the wrong way, you're doing it wrong. That's what a lot of parents did, because that's like a defense mechanism, right? I don't know how to do that, so you're wrong, your teacher's wrong. So I think I love that idea, Rebecca, and I'm going to bring that back to the elementary school that my son goes to.
So all those, sorry, I just looked at the time, so we could talk about this for forever, but looking back at some of those strategies, sorry.
And maybe, okay, the last thing I'll say is, if your PTA, or maybe you don't have a PTA, maybe they're just hosting an academic night, think of something that you feel like parents might be struggling with or students might be struggling with, and volunteer to take that on. If you get 1 or 2 people to come, it might make you feel like, oh, was this worth it? I promise you it is, because those 1 or 2 people will share what they've learned with other classmates or other parents or family members, and it'll just keep spreading. So I know sometimes our staff and educators can feel a little bit underappreciated, and their time isn't valued in the way that it should be. But you are valued. And that's why we need you to come out more and be at events.
Yeah, and so just a few of
Yeah.
these, and we'll send out the presentation later. I know Alberto's sending it out next week, but don't think of family engagement and academic learning as separate activities. So often we think that they're separate or competing, but instead they're opportunities to build on each other and reinforce together. And it doesn't have to be a major undertaking, because honestly, a lot of times the smaller things are where we all learn more. We all get more out of it. And making things actionable. And yes, we will be sharing the whole slides. And then ask for feedback and be ready to adjust. I think it's hard for all of us to have a great idea and maybe then it doesn't work as well as we thought. And it's hard to then change. But that's exactly what we have to do, because every year it's different, right? Every year we've got a different group of people involved in our school community that changes what's happening. And the fourth slide, the fourth I that is involved in transformative family engagement is impactful. So it relates to everything we've been talking about. Family engagement, to be transformative, has to empower families to support their child's success. Family engagement events, programs, and policies should all come back to helping every child reach their full potential. Talking about the why, you ask the same thing with family engagement activities. Why is helping every child reach their full potential? And so if we think about the impact we want to have of empowering families, it helps us better align what we're investing everyone's limited time and energy in. So with impactful, think about how you measure success. Opportunities to practice and interact, very similar to what we just talked about. Developing knowledge and skills. And again, the question that I'd ask everybody to ponder is, how do we measure success beyond head counts? Data is important if it gets us farther down the path to helping kids realize their full potential. If it's just data to collect data, it's not making a long-term impact. So some of the strategies to consider is to conduct focus groups and listening sessions to learn more about how your families feel about their experience engaging with the school, and be prepared for honest feedback. It's not always, and be prepared for it to be different than what you think. Look at your events and programs and activities, ensure that 50% of the time is interactive. That's a hard thing sometimes, even like in our format, to make sure interaction happens. But that is what helps families get more engaged in the programs and services and educational process. And then I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, but it's really important that we think of, instead of doing things at or to, that we're doing things with. So what are we doing with our families rather than to them, and both ways. Like so many times we see all the different stakeholders as in different camps instead of saying together and with. And so back to that initial question we asked, what is transformative? Some of you got the answer because a lot of you in the room are educators, but the definition is causing a marked change in someone or something. So the definition, according to the Center for Family Engagement, of transformative family engagement is that transformative family engagement is a shared effort of families, schools, and community leaders to advance programs, practices, and policies that empower every parent to make their child's potential a reality. Shared, empower, and every child's potential. So I know we're running low on time, but feel free to put your takeaway in the chat. The slide decks will be coming out. And sharing those, Tiari and I's there's contact information on it too. If anybody ever wants follow-up or ever wants Nevada PTA support at your school related to family engagement policies, practices, or presentations, we're happy to help and assist however we can. But love to hear any feedback you have or any questions. Okay. Well, thank you all for taking time out of your schedule to join with us today. We appreciate all you've done and how to help us, and have a wonderful day.